Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is Friday, and all of our guests today are brought to you by the Whistler Golf Club. Great track, great track. We're joined now by Scotty Bowman, winningest head coach in National Hockey League history, over 1,200 victories, another 223 in the playoffs, all sorts of Stanley Cup titles, 9 as a coach, plus more as an executive. I could go on and on, Scotty, but we haven't got time. Thanks so much for joining us, Scotty. How are you?
I'm doing well, and good to be on. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, Scotty, we're in Vancouver. You coached Rick Tocchet in Pittsburgh. What did you like about him as a player, and could you tell back then that he would likely have some success as a head coach?
Well, you know, we had won the Cup for the year before in 91 after making a trade. We made a good trade to get Ron Francis and Ulf Samuelsson at the deadline. It was not an easy trade at that time because John Cullen was about nearly the top of the scoring, but we were looking for some size and center ice strength. Then after the next year, that was the summer that Bob got sick that summer and, you know, eventually passed away at Thanksgiving, and they asked me to come in and if I could just be an interim coach because we were trying to keep the job open and, you know, hopefully that he would be able to come back. But when it didn't happen, I stayed on. I agreed to stay on. And we kind of struggled for the first half of the season, you know, a lot of indecisions. We're kind of concentrating on trying to get our act together after you win the first time, of course. You know, not the first time, but when you win a cup, it's not easy the next year. But it was a crucial trade for us. And just about the deadline, it was a hard trade to make, but we traded Mark Recchi, who was one of our top forwards, and also defenseman Paul Coffey in the trade. We were trying to get a lot tougher because we were getting pushed around a little bit. We had some skill players. Mario was terrific, as you know. Joey Mullen, guys like that. And it was a pretty tough trade, a three-way team trade with Philadelphia. But we ended up with a backup goalie, Ken Reggett, because our other goalie had gone, and Tom Barassa was number one. And we got Rick Tocchet and Shel Samuelsson, a big defenseman. And that turned our team around because Shel had a bit of an edge to him, and Rick came in from a big rival in Philadelphia. That was the two rivals in the time for Pittsburgh and Philly. And he came in and he did a great job for us. He had good hands, and he also had a good hockey IQ, but he had a good edge to him, and nobody was going to take advantage of any of our skilled players. And I think he ended up playing a lot with Mario. Jaromir Jagr was a 19-year-old, and we moved him down in the roster. He played a lot with Brian Trottier, sort of like a second, third line. But Rick was a real good player for us because he could produce at a rate that we needed, but we also was a player he had a good reputation in the league that if somebody was going to take advantage of one of the skill players, they had to answer to him. So it ended up to be a good fit, and we had a good playoff as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the hockey IQ, and that's serving as well as a head coach. How well do you know Jim Rutherford, Scotty, and are the Canucks in good hands with him in charge?
Yeah, he's made some good trades of late. He took his time. I've known Jim a long time because he was in the team went to Carolina from Hartford, and we had a big holdout in Detroit that year. That's before we started to win. We had Keith Primo, who was going to be our eventual replacement for Steve Yzerman as captain and center ice and everything else. But I don't know. We got I wasn't doing the contracts, but a big contract dispute, and Mike Ilitch, the owner, the late Mike Ilitch, he wasn't interested in even thinking about a trade. he said, no, we're not trading him. And, I said, well, we're going to have to play without him for a long time. Well, we were acting pretty tough at the beginning of training camp, but when training camp was over, he hadn't signed, and we didn't know what to do, but he wasn't. There was quite a ways apart. I wasn't doing the contracts, but it looked like it was going to be a long holdout. And then all of a sudden, Brendan Shanahan didn't want to play in Hartford, in Carolina. He had I think he was the captain, and he just wanted out, and it got out in the media that Shanahan was available. So it wasn't an easy trade for us, but it worked for both teams. We traded Primo, and we also traded Paul Coffey to get Brendan Shanahan, and we didn't have a player like Brendan on our roster. He really added a lot to our team. He was not only a great goal scorer, as you know, he also was very tough, and we needed that in a tough division that we were playing in, and also in the playoffs. And so that's the first time I met Jim, and I don't think we made any other. I was doing trades, but I wasn't doing them very long. I only did them because we didn't have a manager that 2 years. We didn't when Brian Murray left, we didn't have a manager, and then Ken Holland came in, and they were training Ken. He was assistant GM, and then after he became general manager, I just coached for the last 3 years. I didn't have to do I didn't feel like doing. In the summertime for a coach, it's no place to be worrying about signing or trading players, because you need to sort of recharge your battery. So, but it all worked out. That's the time I met Jim. I wasn't involved when he. I know he played junior in Montreal for a bit of a stage. I was gone, and then he went to Detroit as a goalie, but I wasn't even there then.
Scotty, I don't know how much you watch Vancouver, but no playoffs here, 7 of the last 8 years, but good young pieces like Pedersen and Hughes. Any comment on those two young players, Scotty?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, the toughest part of rebuilding or trying to restructure a team, of course, I thought Vancouver, when they were going along pretty good, they always had a pretty solid defense core. Nowadays, it seems to be that's the spot that's so hard to improve on. Is you even in at least the last maybe 3 or 4 years, there've been some good defensemen available in the draft, but Heiskanen in Dallas, that was a hang of a pickup. Dallas, they were lucky. I'm not lucky, but I guess in the lottery you got to call it luck. They went down about 8 or 10 spots. They got Makar. They got Heiskanen, and that was the draft that I'm not sure who was. I think it was Hughes. Yeah, he's a great player. Jack Hughes. He went to New Jersey, and then Kakko was a player that had looked good in Finland. Chicago took Kirby Doc. I didn't do a lot of scouting. I didn't even do a lot, but they asked me to go to Vancouver. I spent about it must have been a week. I really liked this kid, Bowen Byram. I stayed and watched him play 5 games with the Giants, and boy, I said, I think you better think about. But they were looking for they knew that Jonathan Taves was not going to be there for a long time. So it still could have been a good player. I don't know why they traded him, but Kirby Doc was a 6'4" center that looked like he was going to really develop. They probably brought him up too early. He had some injuries, and Byram went to Colorado, and I had said at the time, I said, if we don't take Byram, Colorado's going to sit there with him, and they'll have Byram and Makar for a decade, and they will have them now. But defense are hard to get, and I think the last one that who's traded for maybe New Jersey got Hamilton. Mm-hmm. They got a pretty good player from Carolina, but Carolina seems to me the two teams that I keep looking at for defense core, like that's really helping their team, are Carolina and the Rangers. They got some good high end forwards, but to me their defense, Carolina's been living off that solid defense. The guys, that have been there now for a few years, and so much so they could even trade Hamilton, and now they got Brett Burns to sort of replace him, although he's getting old. But Slavin and Pesce and these guys, they got pretty fortunate. They got Brady Shea out of the Rangers, so they got a really good four-man. The top four are good, and Vancouver, it's been tough. They lost. Edler was a really good player, and looked like he was just about at the end. And he's now imagine he's still playing in Los Angeles. But I think the player they got from Detroit, Hronek, I guess Detroit they were looking to the future that maybe they can't afford to pay him what he's going to end up getting, because they got some young defensemen. They got Morris Seider there now. Yep. And they got a really good young guy, 19-year-old Simon Edmondson. They kept him in the minors this year, but he's now back up just for the last month of the season. But, defense is so hard to get, and I don't know what they have in the pipeline. Tanev was a big loss for them. I thought that year that he was there, they looked like they were, getting to be a solid defense core, but when you lose guys like that, you pay for it.
Scotty, you sure you're out of the league? It's like you went through every player. That was outstanding. I can't imagine what you were like when you were working full time. Scotty, what about the Boston Bruins? There's so much parity in the league right now, but Boston is having just an eye-popping year. Can anybody beat the Boston Bruins when it comes to the postseason?
I would be so surprised, because I do know it's less than 40%. The President Trophy winner in the last decade or 15 years has won the Cup, as well as being the runaway leader like Florida Panthers were last year. But I recently talked to Bobby Orr, because I always call him on his birthday. He turned 75 about a week ago, and of course he lives down the other side of Florida, and I live on the West Coast. But he was just mentioning that Bobby played there so long, or played 9 years in Boston. He just said, I don't think anybody could. What do you think? And I said, no. And he said the same thing to me, like, adding Hampus Lindholm last year at the deadline, and then this year Orlov with a defense core. I never thought Boston's defense was that bad, but I never thought it was that strong. But now it's probably the strong part of their team. McAvoy's come on to be a really good young defenseman. Carlo's improved a lot. They're solid. They got four lines. I do know the coach, Jim Montgomery. I played sports with his dad in Montreal when he wasn't even born, but he's a good coach. He got in trouble in Dallas, too bad, but I talked to him a lot, and he knows his team is solid. It's got four lines and a couple of extra guys. They maybe don't wow you with a real superstar, but when you got Marchand and Bergeron, they're special players, because they play two ways. They're not just a lot of the young guys coming out of junior or coming out of the development team. The hot shots that come up through the minor through the youth hockey, they're usually great offensive players, and they don't play the game that they'll eventually play. And I keep looking at a guy like Matthews, who now he's in his 7th season, but now you can see that he's doing everything. Like he's improved his face-offs, he's working both ends of the rink. Yeah, he's not going to score maybe 60 or 50, but I went through that with Steve Yzerman in Detroit, and he was scoring 50 and 60 goals, but the team wasn't going to win in the playoffs because he didn't have that idea of playing both ways. And Bergeron's a key guy for Boston. Krejci's another. He's like a mini Bergeron. He took off for a year. He's back, and he's made a whole line like with Pasternak and this guy they got from Jersey, a surprise pick.
Pavel Zacha, yeah.
Got about 18 goals.
Yeah.
So unless they ran into a real snag, maybe the one area where you'd wonder, you always do going into the playoffs, is Ullmark's been a real find for them. He's 6'4", Swayman's a young goalie that they haven't had a lot of playoff experience, but nevertheless they've had such a banner season. So yeah, I'd be surprised unless they go. You know, you always wonder they're probably going to set a lot of records going down the stretch. Tampa did that about 3-4 years ago, and they got bounced out by
Columbus.
Columbus, yeah. But so sometimes you got to be careful. They haven't had a stroke of adversity. I think the most they've ever lost is 2 games in a row. They're going to have Boston's always been a tough team at home, so they're going to have it's not the end of the world to get all the home games or the edge in them. But I don't know. I'm looking at Colorado maybe, but they lost. I mean, nobody says much about them. Like Gabriel Landeskog was such a key player last year. I mean, they had other players that are terrific, as we know. Certainly, the Makar and McKinnon, and these are great players. But I don't know if Colorado. I mean, nobody talks much about Landeskog. They're doing pretty well right now. They're playing a lot of games without Makar. I don't know the reason. Manson's another one. Eric Johnson's an experience. They're doing. I think when they get everybody back. But I don't know if they can withstand the loss of Landeskog. That's what we don't know. But they look pretty good to me. The Los Angeles Kings have had a terrific season. I mean, I don't know how much playoff experience some of those players have, but I did know Todd McClellan when he worked in Detroit with Mike Babcock. He's a really experienced coach now. He's had great players. He's had players he's had to develop. So it's that's why they play though. I just saw a game in Tampa about last Sunday. I was really impressed with New Jersey. Really impressed. Lindy Ruff is an experienced coach. I drafted him and he played for us. He was a really good, solid, utility kind of player. Could play up and down, and he's got experience. I mean, he coached Buffalo to that '99 Cup that they didn't get. So, but they got really good young players. I don't know how they're going to do in the playoffs.
Scotty, we could go on and on with you. You are amazing. Thank you. Clearly, you follow the league closely still, and that's just something else. We got to get you back on.
Well, I didn't know, but I followed it so much that I don't know this good Russian player that plays in Vancouver,
Kuzmenko.
And I never hear people talk about him as the rookie candidate, but they're going to have to think twice now because, I mean, I saw him score that goal.
Well, they'd have to change the rules, Scotty, right?
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Scotty, can you do the third hour of our show Monday to Friday?
I think you just did.
Yeah, you got the right person, though. I like Rick, and I'm glad he got his chance with a team that has some pieces. And I think you guys will find out he's like an honest guy that worked his way up. He was not even a high draft pick, and those guys usually make pretty good coaches,
Yep, sixth rounder. Scotty, thanks so much for this. All the best in Florida.
Thank you.